Hi guys, welcome to another video on my channel. Today is going to be a video on the 3.2 GT that I did a video on 3 weeks ago. So I asked the question in the video if there was anybody out there that wanted to save it. 3 weeks have now passed, so unfortunately you're going to have to sit here and watch me refurbish this one because somebody has actually bought it. What we've agreed to do is to give it a whole lick of paint, refurbish the alternator and give it a cam belt, water pump and a service. So over the next few weeks I'm going to be doing this for you. So really pleased that somebody has decided to save it. Looking forward to cracking on with it today. What we're going to start with first is getting that alternator off because I need to take it into Birmingham and get it refurbished. So what have we got to do first? We've got to take off the strengthening plates, we've got to remove the exhaust flexi pipes, we've got to pull the subframe off, we have probably got to remove a drive shaft as well because as you can see the alternator is right up behind there in the depths darkest part of the engine bay. So as you've seen me in many videos remove subframes, I'm just going to skip to the part where the subframe is off now and then we can have a look at how we get the alternator out. Went pretty well. There's a couple of broken bolts which I need to sort out, but that's a usual with these V6 engines. The subframe itself isn't in too bad of a condition. We do have some crusty bits starting to appear, but you know, most people would just normally refit that again, but I am going to put it to the customer on whether he wants to get it refurbished. And the two broken bolts we've got one broken stud on the exhaust here, and the second broken bolt is here on the rear manifold in more of a pain of a place to get to than anything else. Now the alternator is hiding up there. Somebody commented in the last video about a loose bolt, and yes, you're right, there is one there which is a bit loose, but it's still sticking fast, but we will tighten that up before we put anything else back together. So what we've got to do now is I've got to take the alternator belt off. I will also remove this pulley as well because I've got to do the cam belt, and I also think it's going to be easier just to undo the last bolt on the power steering rack, so I can drop that down a bit and just pull the alternator out. Should be a lot easier then. Also, while all this is off, I'm going to change the oil filter because on these 3.2 V6s, as you can see, access is very limited indeed. So if you imagine with a subframe in the way there, it's very tight indeed, so I'll get the service done at the same time. Right, now that's out of the way, we need to pull this one off, and then it should give us better access to all the bolts on the alternator. Alright, I have just tightened up that loose bolt. It's all nice and tight now, and now I've got two bolts to undo on the alternator, two 13mm bolts, and then I've got the probably the 8 and 13 on the electrical connections on the back of the alternator to undo, and then we just need to find a way to wiggle it out. I have also disconnected the battery terminals. Now I've undone both the bolts, and the top one hits on the chassis leg, so what you have to do is jack up the engine at the back, and then there's a little recess where you can then pull it out. Right, so now I'm on to removing the electrical connections on the alternator. I have removed the one from the bottom of the alternator, which you can just see in centre of the frame there, and the other one is just on the back of the alternator a little bit further up, but in order to get to it you've got to remove your oil filter. So that has been done. So now let's get up there off camera and get this alternator bolt out. We are now ready to try and get the alternator out. I'm trying to be sneaky to see if I can fit it beneath the drive shaft and the steering rack. I think on this one I'm going to have to take the drive shaft out. But it looks as though it might almost fit. It just depends on how much I can manoeuvre it. What I could also do is undo the engine mount, as being as it's got to come off for the cam belt anyway, and that'll drop the engine down by about 2 inches. So let's struggle on with this and we'll see if we can get it out. Still just swinging on this last pivot. There we go, it is off now. And that's going to be too tight of a fit to get that out of there, so I am going to undo this 17mm nut here, and that should give us plenty of room to squeeze the alternator through that gap. There we go, that wasn't too bad. It's taken me, let's have a look, 2 and a bit hours, so quite fast actually. It's a difficult job. I wouldn't want to do it on my back because access is really tight. But yeah, I think the book time is probably about 4 to 6 hours on doing this. But if you know a few shortcuts, you can definitely reduce the time a bit. Right, a few days later now, the alternator is now back, looking like new. It's been fully refurbished by my guy that I use in Birmingham. So what I've got to do now is try and get it back in that hole up there, which isn't going to be fun. So the main task for the rest of this video is just to get the alternator back in, get it all wired back up, and then we can crack on with the cam belt next week. Right, let's try and get this back through this hole. Actually quite easy. Let's find the nuts and bolts. Right, I'm going to put this back electrical connector on first while the alternator's down a bit, because it's going to make my life a little bit easier. There we go. And now let's try and get the alternator back up so we can put that last bolt in. Right, is the engine up high enough so I can get this bolt in? Probably not. Right, now the alternator's back on, I might as well see if I've got a new oil filter and get that on. Got a genuine oil filter, lubricated the seal up, and put a little bit of oil inside the filter. And now let's try and get this up into the right spot. Oh, it's so much easier to do this without the subframe on. And just so I've got a little bit more leverage on the filter, let's just put a cloth on my hand and then tighten it up. There we go. So there we go, alternator is all now back in. It was quite straightforward to put it back in. I was doubting myself on how easy it would be to put back in, but now it was straightforward, didn't need to worry about it at all. So what's been happening now, I have been speaking to the customer over the last few days. We are going to be refurbishing the front subframe. We are also going to be fitting 2 new front exhaust downpipes, because if you remember in the first video they were a little bit worn. They were okay, they're not leaking, but they hadn't got much life left in them. So he has purchased some Scorpion front pipes, so I will show you those when they come next week. And the next job to do is the cam belt. I'm probably going to start that on Monday now, because it's getting late on a Friday afternoon. So I need to have a little bit of a tidy up, because everywhere's a bit of a mess from all the work I've had to do this week. And a sneaky peek at a video coming up in a few weeks' time. So there we go, guys. I will leave the video there now. So don't forget to hit that like button. If you're a first-time watcher, please consider subscribing. And I shall see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.